Sometimes while on vacation, deep in the woods, it isn't always the best idea to ask locals for fun things to do at night. So turn out the light and pull up the covers as I share a tale of the paranormal. The North Woods of Wisconsin, known to locals as the Up North, and is where Wisconsinites and folks from northern Illinois flock each summer for family vacation. Pine forests, state parks, and thousands of lakes make up the landscape. While growing up in the 70s and 80s, our family was no different and would travel to a quiet resort that featured 7 lakes every July for a week. I would refer to one of the lakes as Fun Lake because it was where people liked to water ski, swim, canoe, and kayak, while the other lakes were mainly for fishing. Dozens of cabins were nestled along the northern shore of the Fun Lake. Each featured a stone fireplace, 2 bedrooms, a small bathroom, and a screened-in porch. But there were no TVs or phones, as the intent of this getaway was to be secluded from the outside world while you were there. Meals were prepared for guests, and a large bell would sound when breakfast, lunch, and dinner was being served at the community dining room. That is where all the kids would swap stories about their adventures for the day. Having gone there over the years, there were a group of kids I expected to see each year. My younger sister was a social butterfly, so I would quickly become friends with those I didn't know through her. It was 1985, and this particular summer, I was probably the oldest at 19. There was not much to do after sunset at the resort. So me and a friend, Sarah, began asking some of the resort workers who were locals what there was to do at night. An elderly woman in her 70s, Edna, had spent her entire life living in the North Woods. She told us about the Summerwind, an old abandoned mansion on the shore of one of the lakes about 40 minutes away. The mansion was once owned by Jonathan Carver, an 18th century explorer who may have fraudulently claimed the land from 2 Sioux Indian chiefs. Even to this day, there are questions surrounding his land grant. Edna explained that the mansion was rumored to be haunted by him. She also told us about a woman who was murdered in the mansion and was then hidden in the walls. That's all we needed to hear to determine our plans for the night. Word of the abandoned mansion, not that it was haunted, quickly spread from cabin to cabin, attracting all the kids at the resort. We loaded up 3 carloads of kids, some as young as 8 or 9. Sarah and I were the oldest. It took a while to get everyone organized. Dusk had settled over the resort by the time we set out to the mansion. As we drew close, we drove down a long, unmarked road that was overgrown with tall weeds and brush. The only thing marking our voyage was the dust that kicked up from our tires. Our headlights illuminated the front of the decaying building as we pulled up to the mansion. It was everything you expected for a creepy haunted house to look like. The mansion was made of wood, and it had turned to a lifeless shade of weathered gray as it rotted away over the centuries. There were no doors or windows, so there was no telling of who or what may await us inside. We were greeted with a warm summer breeze and a foul smell permeating from the mansion as we stepped out of the cars. Edna mentioned that the only inhabitants of the mansion nowadays were hundreds of bats, so I'm pretty certain that the smell was bat feces. Being the control freak that I am, I quickly laid out a few safety rules before going inside. The last thing that I wanted was for anyone to get hurt, so I had everyone partner up and ensured that older kids were paired up with the younger ones. We were limited in the number of flashlights we had, so light was limited as we crept through the front door. Everyone was quiet, The youngest kids white-knuckled the hands of the older kids that they were paired with. I shined the light back and forth in the first room, expecting to reveal some creepy face looking back at me. The interior of the house was just as weathered as the exterior. Only the framing of the walls remained in most rooms. In some rooms I could see outside through gaps in the exterior walls. We came across a stairway leading to the second floor. There were several broken or missing steps and no handrail. "No one goes upstairs," I said. "Not unless you want to fall through." No one argued. We found our way to a set of stone stairs that led down into the basement. I ran my hand along the wall, feeling its age, and noticed bullet holes. Edna told Sarah and I about someone who recently visited the mansion and saw something rise up from the basement, which prompted him to shoot at it. The longer we were there, the more unsettled we all grew. Eventually, we entered a room that was noticeably cooler than the rest of the house. I found this odd since there was a large bay window just a few feet away where the hot summer air should have easily filled. "This would be a great place for the Ouija board," one of the teenage girls blurted out. No one said anything about a Ouija board before we left the resort, so it came as a bit of a surprise to me. Okay, I responded. I knew very little about the Ouija board and at the time did not believe in ghosts. Every story that I heard sounded like total BS to me. Given my skepticism, I suggested that anyone who would be using the Ouija board had to be blindfolded. The girl who brought the board and her sister agreed. They placed the board on the floor and I blindfolded each of them myself to ensure that there was no trickery. We started to ask questions. "Is anyone other than us here?" Nothing happened, and I rolled my eyes, as my suspicions were confirmed about the Ouija board being just a myth. "Is anyone other than us here?" someone said again. The planchette slowly slid to yes. I leaned in to check their fingertips and blindfolds while the questions continued. Everything seemed legit to me. I looked over at Sarah, who was staring back at me with raised eyebrows. Both of our curiosities had been piqued. "What is your name?" The planchette slowly spelled out CARVER. Sarah and I recognized the name and immediately looked at each other in disbelief. The other kids tried to decipher the meaning of the word when I shared the story that Edna had told us about Jonathan Carver. Remember, the kids only knew of the abandoned mansion at this point, not the stories that went with it. Some of the younger kids tried their best to be brave, but couldn't hide the tears in their eyes as the fear slowly grew amongst the group. I asked, "Is the deed to this land here?" The planchette slid to yes. "Where can we find the deed?" The planchette glided across the board with ease, spelling out upstairs. I took a step back, trying to register what was going on while others continued with their questions. I could feel the hair in my arms raise as I felt my body sink into a coldness, almost as if I had jumped into a pool of water in the middle of winter. I looked to Sarah, looking for some sort of reassurance that what I was seeing was real, and noticed she too was feeling the same. She had lost the color in her complexion, and I could clearly see the terror she felt in her face. "Do you want us to leave?" I asked, and the planchette slid to the letters N-O. Okay, I guess we're good, I thought. But then the planchette jerked the girl's hand over to W. The board did not tell us to leave. It demanded we leave now. The younger kids all began to cry, and I knew it was time to go. After all, I didn't want to be assaulted by a mob of angry parents the next day because their kids were too scared to go to sleep. "Everyone grab your partner and follow me," I yelled out. I counted each head as they left. Everyone gathered by the cars, looking back at the mansion one last time. Some of the older kids laughed about what had happened, while others stood in silence listening to the younger children still crying. My sister had a disposable 35mm camera with her. I could hear the clicking of the camera as she wound it to pictures of the mansion before we left. A few weeks passed before the film was developed. We fingered through the photos, reliving the joys of the week, when we came across a picture of the mansion and paused in disbelief. Standing at one of the second-floor windows was a woman staring down at us. She was in a plain, grayish-white dress and had her hair up in what looked like a bun. While I remain a skeptical person to this day, I cannot explain how the blindfolded girls would be able to answer questions that they didn't know the answers to. Sadly, Summerwind Mansion burned to the ground a few years later, and all that remains is the stone foundation, the brick fireplaces, and a lot of really cool memories. Have a story about the Ouija board or something paranormal? Share it with us, and maybe it will be told in a future episode. Until then, sleep tight.